Abbey Road is the 11th studio album by the English rock band The Beatles, released on the 26th of September 1969 by Apple Records. It is the last album the group recorded, although Let It Be, 1970, was the last album completed before the band's breakup in April 1970. It was mostly recorded in April, July, and August 1969 and topped the record charts in both the United States and the United Kingdom. A double A-side single from the album, Something, Come Together, was released in October, which also topped the charts in the US. Abbey Road incorporates styles such as rock, pop, blues, and progressive rock, and makes prominent use of the Moog synthesizer and guitar played through a Leslie speaker unit. It is also notable for having a long medley of songs on side 2 that have subsequently been covered as one suite by other notable artists. The album was recorded in a more collegial atmosphere than the Get Back, Let It Be sessions earlier in the year, but there were still significant confrontations within the band, particularly over Paul McCartney's song Maxwell's Silver Hammer, and John Lennon did not perform on several tracks. By the time the album was released, Lennon had left the group, though this was not publicly announced until McCartney also quit the following year. Although Abbey Road was an instant commercial success, it received mixed reviews upon release. Some critics found its music inauthentic and criticized the production's artificial effects. By contrast, critics today view the album as one of the Beatles' best and one of the greatest albums of all time. George Harrison's 2 songs on the album, Something and Here Comes the Sun, are considered among the best he wrote for the group. The album's cover, featuring the Beatles walking across the zebra crossing outside of Abbey Road Studios, then officially named EMI Studios, is one of the most famous and imitated of all time. Background: after the recording sessions for the proposed Get Back album, Paul McCartney suggested to producer George Martin that the group get together and make an album the way we used to do it, free of the conflict that had begun during sessions for the Beatles, also known as the White Album. Martin agreed, but on the strict condition that all the group, particularly John Lennon, allow him to produce the record in the same manner as earlier albums, and that discipline would be adhered to. No one was sure that the work would be the group's last, though George Harrison later recalled that it felt as if we were reaching the end of the line. Production recording history. The first sessions for Abbey Road began on 22nd of February 1969, only 3 weeks after the Get Back sessions in Trident Studios. There, the group recorded a backing track for I Want You, She's So Heavy, with Billy Preston accompanying them on Hammond organ. No further group recording occurred until April because of Ringo Starr's commitments on the film The Magic Christian. After a small amount of work that month, and a session for You Never Give Me Your Money on the 6th of May, the group took an 8-week break before recommencing on the 2nd of July. Recording continued through July and August, and the last backing track, for Because, was taped on the 1st of August. Overdubs continued through the month, with the final sequencing of the album coming together on the 20th of August, the last time all 4 Beatles were present in a studio together. McCartney, Starr, and Martin have reported positive recollections of the sessions, while Harrison said, "We did actually perform like musicians again." Lennon and McCartney had enjoyed working together on the non-album single The Ballad of John and Yoko in April, sharing friendly banter between takes, and some of this camaraderie carried over to the Abbey Road sessions. Nevertheless, there was a significant amount of tension in the group. According to Ian MacDonald, McCartney had an acrimonious argument with Lennon during the sessions. Lennon's wife Yoko Ono had become a permanent presence at Beatles recordings and clashed with other members. Halfway through recording in June, Lennon and Ono were involved in a car accident. A doctor told Ono to rest in bed, so Lennon had one installed in the studio so she could observe the recording process from there. During the sessions, Lennon expressed a desire to have all of his songs on one side of the album, and McCartney's on the other. The album's 2 halves represented a compromise. Lennon wanted a traditional release with distinct and unrelated songs, while McCartney and Martin wanted to continue their thematic approach from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by incorporating a medley. Lennon ultimately said that he disliked Abbey Road as a whole and felt that it lacked authenticity, calling McCartney's contributions music for the grannies to dig and not real songs, and describing the medley as junk, just bits of songs thrown together. Technical aspects: Abbey Road was recorded on 8-track reel-to-reel tape machines rather than the 4-track machines that were used for earlier Beatles albums such as Sgt. Pepper, and was the first Beatles album not to be issued in mono anywhere in the world. The album makes prominent use of guitar played through a Leslie speaker and of the Moog synthesizer. The Moog is not merely used as a background effect, but sometimes plays a central role, as in Because, where it is used for the middle 8. It is also prominent on Maxwell's Silver Hammer and Here Comes the Sun. The synthesizer was introduced to the band by Harrison, who acquired one in November 1968 and used it to create his album Electronic Sound. Starr made more prominent use of the tom-toms on Abbey Road, later saying the album was Tom-Tom Madness. I went nuts on the toms. Abbey Road was also the first and only Beatles album to be entirely recorded through a solid-state transistor mixing desk, the TG-2345 Memcac 1, as opposed to earlier tube, thermionic valve-based red desks. The TG console also allowed better support for 8-track recording, facilitating the Beatles' considerable use of overdubbing. Emmerich recalls that the TG desk used to record the album had individual limiters and compressors on each audio channel, and noted that the overall sound was softer than the earlier tube valve desks. In his study of the role of the TG-12345 in the Beatles' sound on Abbey Road, the music historian Kenneth Womack observes that the expansive sound palette and mixing capabilities of the TG-12345 enabled George Martin and Jeff Emmerich to imbue the Beatles' sound with greater definition and clarity. The warmth of solid-state recording also afforded their music with brighter tonalities and a deeper low end that distinguished Abbey Road from the rest of their corpus, providing listeners with an abiding sense that the Beatles' final long player was markedly different. Alan Parsons worked as an assistant engineer on the album. He later went on to engineer Pink Floyd's landmark album The Dark Side of the Moon and produce many popular albums himself with the Alan Parsons Project. John Kurlander also assisted on many of the sessions and went on to become a successful engineer and producer, most noteworthy for his success on the scores for the Lord of the Rings film trilogy. Songs. Side 1, Come Together. Come Together was an expansion of Let's Get It Together, a song Lennon originally wrote for Timothy Leary's California gubernatorial campaign against Ronald Reagan. A rough version of the lyrics for Come Together was written at Lennon's and Ono's second bed-in event in Montreal. The biographer Jonathan Gould suggested that the song has only a single pariah-like protagonist, and Lennon was painting another sardonic self-portrait. MacDonald has suggested that the Juju Eyeballs has been claimed to refer to Dr. John and Spinal Cracker to Ono. The song was later the subject of a lawsuit brought against Lennon by Morris Levy because the opening line in Come Together, Here Come Old Flat Top, was admittedly lifted from a line in Chuck Berry's You Can't Catch Me. A settlement was reached in 1973 in which Lennon promised to record 3 songs from Levy's publishing catalog for his next album. Come Together was later released as a double A-side single with Something. In the liner notes to the compilation album Love, Martin described the track as a simple song, but it stands out because of the sheer brilliance of the performers. Something. Harrison was inspired to write Something during sessions for the White Album by listening to his label mate James Taylor's Something in the Way She Moves from his album James Taylor. After the lyrics were refined during the Let It Be sessions, tapes reveal Lennon giving Harrison some songwriting advice during its composition. The song was initially given to Joe Cocker, but was subsequently recorded for Abbey Road. Cocker's version appeared on his album Joe Cocker that November. Something was Lennon's favorite song on the album, and McCartney considered it the best song Harrison had written. Though the song was written by Harrison, Frank Sinatra once commented that it was his favorite Lennon-McCartney composition and the greatest love song ever written. Lennon contributed piano to the recording, and while most of the part was removed, traces of it remain in the final cut, notably on the middle 8, before Harrison's guitar solo. The song was issued as a double A-side single with Come Together in October 1969 and topped the U.S. charts for 1 week, becoming the Beatles' first #1 single that was not a Lennon-McCartney composition. It was also the first Beatles single from an album already released in the UK. Apple's Neil Aspinall filmed a promotional video which combined separate footage of the Beatles and their wives. Maxwell's Silver Hammer. Maxwell's Silver Hammer, McCartney's first song on the album, was first performed by the Beatles during the Let It Be sessions, as seen in the film. He wrote the song after the group's trip to India in 1968 and wanted to record it for the White Album, but it was rejected by the others as too complicated. The recording was fraught with tension between band members, as McCartney annoyed others by insisting on a perfect performance. The track was the first Lennon was invited to work on following his car accident, but he hated it and declined to do so. According to engineer Geoff Emerick, Lennon said it was more of Paul's granny music and left the session. He spent the next 2 weeks with Ono and did not return to the studio until the backing track for Come Together was laid down on the 21st of July. Harrison was also tired of the song, saying we had to play it over and over again until Paul liked it. It was a real drag. Starr was more sympathetic to the song. It was granny music, he admitted, but we needed stuff like that on our album so other people would listen to it. Longtime roadie Mal Evans played the anvil sound in the chorus. This track also makes use of Harrison's Moog synthesizer, played by McCartney. Oh, Darling! Oh, Darling! Was written by McCartney in a doo-wop style, like contemporary work by Frank Zappa. It was tried at the Get Back sessions, and a version appears on Anthology 3. It was subsequently re-recorded in April, with overdubs in July and August. McCartney attempted recording the lead vocal only once a day. He said, "I came into the studios early every day for a week to sing it by myself, because at first my voice was too clear. I wanted it to sound as though I'd been performing it on stage all week." Lennon thought he should have sung it, remarking that it was more his style. Octopus's Garden. As was the case with most of the Beatles' albums, Starr sang lead vocal on one track. Octopus's Garden is his second and last solo composition released on any album by the band. It was inspired by a trip with his family to Sardinia aboard Peter Sellers' yacht after Starr left the band for 2 weeks during the sessions for the White Album. Starr received a full songwriting credit and composed most of the lyrics, although the song's melodic structure was partly written in the studio by Harrison. The pair would later collaborate as writers on Starr's solo singles It Don't Come Easy, Back Off Boogaloo, and Photograph. I Want You, She's So Heavy. I Want You, She's So Heavy was written by Lennon about his relationship with Ono, and he made a deliberate choice to keep the lyrics simple and concise. Author Tom McGinnis writes that the song had a progressive rock influence, with its unusual length and structure, repeating guitar riff, and white noise effects, though he noted the I Want You section has a straightforward blues structure. The finished song is a combination of 2 different recording attempts. The first attempt occurred in February 1969, almost immediately after the Get Back, Let It Be sessions with Billy Preston. This was subsequently combined with a second version made during the Abbey Road sessions proper in April. The 2 sections together ran to nearly 8 minutes, making it the Beatles' second longest released track. Lennon used Harrison's Moog synthesizer with a white noise setting to create a wind effect that was overdubbed on the second half of the track. During the final edit, Lennon told Emerick to cut it right there at 7 minutes and 44 seconds, creating a sudden, jarring silence that concludes the first side of Abbey Road. The recording tape would have run out within 20 seconds as it was. The final mixing and editing of the track occurred on the 20th of August 1969, the last day on which all 4 Beatles were together in the studio. Side 2, Here Comes the Sun. Here Comes the Sun was written by Harrison in Eric Clapton's garden in Surrey during a break from stressful band business meetings. The basic track was recorded on the 7th of July 1969. Harrison sang lead and played acoustic guitar, McCartney provided backing vocals and played bass, and Starr played the drums. Lennon was still recovering from his car accident and did not perform on the track. Martin provided an orchestral arrangement in collaboration with Harrison, who overdubbed a Moog synthesizer part on 19th of August, immediately before the final mix. Though not released as a single, the song attracted attention and critical praise, and was included on the compilation 1967 to 1970. It has been featured several times on BBC Radio 4's Desert Island Discs, having been chosen by Sandy Shaw, Jerry Springer, Boris Johnson, and Elaine Page. The Daily Telegraph's Martin Chilton said it was almost impossible not to sing along to. Since digital downloads have become eligible to chart, it reached number 56 in 2010 after the Beatles' back catalog was released on iTunes. Harrison recorded a guitar solo for this track that did not appear in the final mix. It was rediscovered in 2012, and footage of Martin and Harrison's son Donnie listening to it in the studio was released on the DVD of Living in the Material World. Because was inspired by Lennon listening to Ono playing Ludwig van Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata on the piano. He recalled he was lying on the sofa in our house, listening to Yoko play. Suddenly, I said, "Can you play those chords backward?" She did, and I wrote "because" around them. The track features three-part harmonies by Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison, which were then triple-tracked to give 9 voices in the final mix. The group considered the vocals to be some of the hardest and most complex they attempted. Harrison played the Moog synthesizer, and Martin played the harpsichord that opens the track. Medley. The remainder of Side 2 consists of a 16-minute medley of 8 tracks consisting of a number of short songs and song fragments known during the recording sessions as The Long One, recorded over July and August and blended into a suite by McCartney and Martin. Some songs were written and originally recorded in demo form during sessions for the White Album and Get Back, Let It Be, which later appeared on Anthology 3. While the idea for the medley was McCartney's, Martin claims credit for some structure, adding he wanted to get John and Paul to think more seriously about their music. The first track recorded for the medley was the opening number, You Never Give Me Your Money. McCartney has said the band's dispute over Alan Klein and what McCartney viewed as Klein's empty promises were the inspiration for the song's lyrics. However, MacDonald doubts this, given that the backing track, recorded on the 6th of May at Olympic Studios, predated the worst altercations between Klein and McCartney. The track is a suite of varying styles, ranging from a piano-led ballad at the start to arpeggiated guitars at the end. Both Harrison and Lennon provided guitar solos, with Lennon playing the solos at the end of the track. This song transitions into Lennon's Sun King, which, like Because, showcases Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison's triple-tracked harmonies. Following it are Lennon's Mean Mr. Mustard, written during the Beatles' 1968 trip to India, and Polythene Pam. These in turn are followed by 4 McCartney songs, She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, written after a fan entered McCartney's residence via his bathroom window, Golden Slumbers, based on Thomas Decker's 17th century poem set to new music, Carry That Weight, reprising elements from You Never Give Me Your Money, and featuring chorus vocals from all 4 Beatles, and closing with The End. The End features Starr's only drum solo in the Beatles' catalog. The drums are mixed across 2 tracks in true stereo, unlike most releases at that time where they were hard-panned left or right. 54 seconds into the song are 18 bars of lead guitar. The first 2 bars are played by McCartney, the second 2 by Harrison, and the third 2 by Lennon, and the sequence is repeated 2 more times. Harrison suggested the idea of a guitar solo in the track. Lennon decided they should trade solos, and McCartney elected to go first. The solos were cut live against the existing backing track in 1 take. Immediately after Lennon's third and final solo, the piano chords of the final part of the song begin. The song ends with the memorable final line, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. This section was taped separately from the first and required the piano to be re-recorded by McCartney, which was done on 18th of August. An alternative version of the song, with Harrison's lead guitar solo played against McCartney's, and Starr's drum solo heard in the background, appears on the Anthology 3 album and the 2012 digital-only compilation album, Tomorrow Never Knows. Musicologist Walter Everett interprets that most of the lyrics on Side 2's medley deal with selfishness and self-gratification, the financial complaints in You Never Give Me Your Money, the miserliness of Mr. Mustard, the holding back of the pillow in Carry That Weight, the desire that some second person will visit the singer's dreams, perhaps the one sweet dream of You Never Give Me Your Money, in the end. Everett adds that the medley's selfish moments are played in the context of the tonal center of A, while generosity is expressed in songs where C major is central. The medley concludes with a great compromise in the negotiations in the end, which serves as a structurally balanced coda. In response to the repeated A major choruses of Love You, McCartney sings in realization that there is as much self-gratifying love, the love you take, as there is of the generous love, the love you make, in A major and C major, respectively. Her Majesty. Her Majesty was recorded by McCartney on the 2nd of July when he arrived before the rest of the group at Abbey Road. It was originally included in a rough mix of the Side 2 medley and officially available in this form for the first time on the album's 3-CD Super Deluxe Edition box set, appearing between Mean Mr. Mustard and Polythene Pam. McCartney disliked the way the medley sounded when it included Her Majesty, so he asked for it to be cut. The second engineer, John Kurlander, had been instructed by George Martin not to throw out anything, so after McCartney left, he attached the track to the end of the master tape after 20 seconds of silence. The tape box bore an instruction to leave Her Majesty off the final product. But the next day when mastering engineer Malcolm Davies received the tape, he, also trained not to throw anything away, cut a playback lacquer of the whole sequence, including Her Majesty. The Beatles liked this effect and included it on the album. Her Majesty opens with the final, crashing chord of Mean Mr. Mustard, while the final note remained buried in the mix of Polythene Pam as a result of being snipped off the reel during a rough mix of the medley on 30th of July. The medley was subsequently mixed again from scratch, although the song was not touched again and still appears in its rough mix on the album. Original US and UK pressings of Abbey Road do not list Her Majesty on the album's cover, nor on the record label, making it a hidden track. The song title appears on the inlay card and disc of the 1987 remastered CD reissue as track 17. It also appears on the sleeve, booklet, and disc of the 2009 remastered CD reissue, but not on the cover or record label of the 2012 vinyl reissue or the 2019 remix of the album. Unreleased material. 3 days after the session for I Want You, She's So Heavy, Harrison recorded solo demos of All Things Must Pass, which became the title track of his 1970 triple album, Something and Old Brown Shoe. The latter was re-recorded by the Beatles in April 1969 and issued as the B-side of The Ballad of John and Yoko the following month. All three of these Harrison demos were later featured on Anthology 3. During the sessions for the medley, McCartney recorded Come and Get It, playing all the instruments. It was assumed to be a demo recording for another artist, but McCartney later said that he originally intended to put it on Abbey Road. It was instead covered by Badfinger, while McCartney's original recording appeared on Anthology 3. The original backing track to Something, featuring a piano-led coda and You Never Give Me Your Money, which leads into a fast rock and roll jam session, have appeared on bootlegs. Cover photo. Apple Records creative director Kosh designed the album cover. It is the only original UK Beatles album sleeve to show neither the artist name nor the album title on its front cover, which was Kosh's idea, despite EMI saying the record would not sell without this information. He later explained that, "We didn't need to write the band's name on the cover. They were the most famous band in the world." The front cover was a photograph of the group walking on a zebra crossing, based on ideas that McCartney sketched, and taken on the 8th of August 1969 outside EMI Studios on Abbey Road. At 11:35 that morning, photographer Ian McMillan was given only 10 minutes to take the photo while he stood on a stepladder and a policeman held up traffic behind the camera. McMillan took 6 photographs, which McCartney examined with a magnifying glass before deciding which would be used on the album sleeve. In the image selected by McCartney, the group walk across the street in single file from left to right, with Lennon leading, followed by Starr, McCartney, and Harrison. McCartney is barefoot and out of step with the others. Except for Harrison, the group are wearing suits designed by Tommy Nutter. A white Volkswagen Beetle is to the left of the picture, parked next to the zebra crossing, which belonged to one of the people living in the block of flats across from the recording studio. After the album was released, the number plate, LMW281F, was repeatedly stolen from the car. In 2004, news sources published a claim made by retired American salesman Paul Cole that he was the man standing on the pavement to the right of the picture. Release. In mid-1969, Lennon formed a new group, the Plastic Ono Band, in part because the Beatles had rejected his song, Cold Turkey. While Harrison worked with such artists as Leon Russell, Doris Troy, Preston and Delaney and Bonnie through to the end of the year, McCartney took a hiatus from the group after his daughter Mary was born on the 28th of August. On the 20th of September, 6 days before Abbey Road was released, Lennon told McCartney, Starr, and business manager Alan Klein, Harrison was not present, that he wanted a divorce from the group. Apple released Something backed with Come Together in the US on the 6th of October 1969. Release of the single in the UK followed on 31st of October, while Lennon released the Plastic Ono Band's Cold Turkey the same month. The Beatles did little promotion of Abbey Road directly, and no public announcement was made of the band's split until McCartney announced he was leaving the group in April 1970. By this time, the Get Back project, by now retitled Let It Be, had been re-examined, with overdubs and mixing sessions continuing into 1970. Therefore, Let It Be became the last album to be finished and released by the Beatles, although its recording had begun before Abbey Road. Abbey Road sold 4 million copies in its first 2 months of release. In the UK, the album debuted at number 1, where it remained for 11 weeks before being displaced for 1 week by the Rolling Stones' Let It Bleed. The following week, which was Christmas, Abbey Road returned to the top for another 6 weeks, completing a total of 17 weeks, before being displaced by Led Zeppelin's Led Zeppelin II. Altogether, it spent 81 weeks on the UK albums chart. The album also performed strongly overseas. In the US, it spent 11 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Top LPs chart. It was the National Association of Recording Merchandisers, NARM, best-selling album of 1969. In Japan, it was one of the longest charting albums to date, remaining in the top 100 for 298 weeks during the 1970s. Critical reception. Contemporary Abbey Road initially received mixed reviews from music critics, who criticized the production's artificial sounds and viewed its music as inauthentic. William Mann of the Times said that the album will be called gimmicky by people who want a record to sound exactly like a live performance, although he considered it to be teeming with musical invention, and added, Nightz has Come Together and Harrison's Something they are minor pleasures in the context of the whole disc. Side 2 is marvelous. Ed Ward of Rolling Stone called the album complicated instead of complex, and felt that the Moog synthesizer disembodies and artificializes the band's sound, adding that they create a sound that could not possibly exist outside the studio. While he found the medley on side 2 to be their most impressive music since Rubber Soul, Nick Cohn of the New York Times said that, individually, the album's songs are nothing special. Albert Goldman of Life magazine wrote that Abbey Road is not one of the Beatles' great albums, and, despite some lovely phrases and stirring segues, Side 2's suite seems symbolic of the Beatles' latest phase, which might be described as the round-the-clock production of disposable music effects. John Gabri of the magazine High Fidelity wrote of the album, "What's to say? If you like the Beatles, you'll like the record. If you have your doubts, this will do nothing to allay them. Of course, as someone just said, they do have something." Conversely, Chris Welch wrote in Melody Maker, "The truth is, their latest LP is just a natural-born gas, entirely free of pretension, deep meanings, or symbolism. While production is simple compared to past intricacies, it is still extremely sophisticated and inventive." Derek Jewell of the Sunday Times found the album refreshingly terse and unpretentious. and although he lamented the band's cod 1920s jokes, Maxwell's Silver Hammer, and Ringo's obligatory nursery arias, Octopus's Garden, he considered that Abbey Road touches higher peaks than did their last album. John Mendelsohn, writing for Rolling Stone, called it breathtakingly recorded and praised side 2 especially, equating it to the whole of Sgt. Pepper, and stating that the Beatles can unify seemingly countless musical fragments and lyrical doodlings into a uniformly wonderful suite, seems potent testimony that no, they've far from lost it, and no, they haven't stopped trying. Don Heckman of Stereo Review named the album one of the best recordings of the month of January 1970, remarking that it was better than the Beatles or Magical Mystery Tour, and probably the equal of Sgt. Pepper, adding, "I suppose I haven't really come up with any new compliments for the Beatles, not that they need them, but I hope I have at least persuaded you to hear Abbey Road. You'll find it a happy experience." While covering the Rolling Stones' 1969 American tour for the Village Voice, Robert Christgau reported from a meeting with Grau Marcus in Berkeley that opinion has shifted against the Beatles. Everyone is putting down Abbey Road. Shortly afterwards in Los Angeles, he wrote that his colleague Ellen Willis had grown to love the record, adding, "Damned if she isn't right, flawed but fine. Because the world is round, it turns her on. Charlie Watts tells us he likes it too." Retrospective. Many critics have since cited Abbey Road as the Beatles' greatest album. In a retrospective review, Nicole Penziero of Pop Matters called it an amazingly cohesive piece of music, innovative and timeless. Mark Kemp of Paste viewed the album as being among the Beatles' finest works, even if it foreshadows the cigarette lighter waving arena rock that technically skilled but critically maligned artists from Journey to Meatloaf would belabor throughout the 70s and 80s. Neil McCormick of the Daily Telegraph dubbed it the Beatles' last love letter to the world, and praised its big, modern sound, calling it lush, rich, smooth, epic, emotional, and utterly gorgeous. AllMusic's Richie Unterberger felt that the album shared Sgt. Pepper's faux conceptual forms, but had stronger compositions, and wrote of its standing in the band's catalog. Whether Abbey Road is the Beatles' best work is debatable, but it's certainly the most immaculately produced, with the possible exception of Sgt. Pepper, and most tightly constructed. Ian MacDonald gave a mixed opinion of the album, noting that several tracks had been written at least a year previously, and would possibly have been unsuitable without being integrated into the medley on side 2. He did, however, praise the production, particularly the sound of Starr's bass drum. Abbey Road has received high rankings in several greatest albums of all time lists and polls by critics and publications. It was voted number 8 in the 3rd edition of Colin Larkin's book All Time Top 1000 Albums, 2000. Time included it in their 2006 list of the all-time 100 albums. In 2009, readers of Rolling Stone named Abbey Road the greatest Beatles album. In 2020, the magazine ranked the album at number 5 on its list of the 500 greatest albums of all time, the highest Beatles record on the list. A previous version of the list from 2012 had ranked it at number 14. The album was also included in the book 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. Legacy Abbey Road Crossing and Paul is Dead. The front cover image of the Beatles on the Abbey Road crossing has become one of the most famous and imitated in recording history. The crossing is a popular destination for Beatles fans, and a webcam has operated there since 2011. In December 2010, the crossing was given Grade 2 listed status for its cultural and historical importance. The Abbey Road studios themselves had been given similar status earlier in the year. Shortly after the album's release, the cover became part of the Paul is Dead conspiracy theory that was spreading across college campuses in the U.S. According to followers of the rumor, the cover depicted the Beatles walking out of a cemetery in a funeral procession. The procession was led by Lennon dressed in white as a religious figure. Starr was dressed in black as the Undertaker. McCartney, out of step with the others, was a barefoot corpse, and Harrison, dressed in denim, was the gravedigger. The left-handed McCartney is holding a cigarette in his right hand, indicating that he is an imposter, and part of the number plate on the Volkswagen parked on the street is 281F, misread as 28IF, meaning that McCartney would have been 28 if he had lived, despite the fact that he was only 27 at the time of the photo and subsequent release of the record. The escalation of the "Paul is dead" rumor became the subject of intense analysis on mainstream radio and contributed to Abbey Road's commercial success in the U.S. Lennon was interviewed in London by New York's WMCA, and he ridiculed the rumor, but conceded that it was invaluable publicity for the album. The cover image has been parodied on several occasions, including by Booker T and the MG's Macklemore Avenue 1970, Kanye West's Late Orchestration 2006, and by McCartney on his 1993 live album Paul is Live. On the cover of its October 1977 issue, the satirical magazine National Lampoon depicted the four Beatles flattened along the zebra crossing, with a road roller driving away up the street. The Red Hot Chili Peppers, the Abbey Road EP parodies the cover, with the band walking near naked across a similar zebra crossing. In 2003, several U.S. poster companies airbrushed McCartney's cigarette out of the image without permission from Apple or McCartney. In 2013, Kolkata police launched a traffic safety awareness advertisement against jaywalking, using the cover and a caption that read, "If they can, why can't you?" Cover versions and influence drawings. The songs on Abbey Road have been covered many times, and the album itself has been covered in its entirety. 1 month after Abbey Road's release, George Benson recorded a cover version of the album called The Other Side of Abbey Road. Later in 1969, Booker T and the MGs recorded Macklemore Avenue, the location in Memphis of Stax Records, which covered the Abbey Road songs and had a similar cover photo. While matching albums such as Sgt. Pepper in terms of popularity, Abbey Road failed to repeat the Beatles' earlier achievements in galvanizing their rivals to imitate them. In author Peter Doggett's description, too contrived for the rock underground to copy, too complex for the bubblegum pop brigade to copy, the album influenced no one, except Paul McCartney, who spent years trying to emulate its scope in his solo career. Writing for Classic Rock in 2014, John Anderson of the progressive rock band Yes said his group were constantly influenced by the Beatles from Revolver onwards, but it was the feeling that Side 2 was one complete idea that inspired him to create long-form pieces of music. Several artists have covered some or all of the Side 2 medley, including Phil Collins for the Martin Beatles tribute album In My Life, The String Cheese Incident, Transatlantic and Tenacious D, who performed the medley with Fish keyboardist Paige McConnell. Further, a jam band including former Grateful Dead members Bob Weir and Phil Lesh played the entire Abbey Road album during its spring tour 2011. It began with a Come Together opener at Boston on the 4th of March and ended with the entire medley in New York City on the 15th of March, including Her Majesty as an encore. Continued sales and reissues. In June 1970, Alan Klein reported that Abbey Road was the Beatles' best-selling album in the U.S. with sales of about 5 million. By 1992, Abbey Road had sold 9 million copies. The album became the 9th most downloaded on the iTunes Store a week after it was released there on 16th of November 2010. A CNN report stated it was the best-selling vinyl album of 2011. It is the first album from the 1960s to sell over 5 million albums since 1991 when Nielsen SoundScan began tracking sales. In the U.S., the album had sold 7,177,797 copies by the end of the 1970s. As of 2011, the album had sold over 31 million copies worldwide and is one of the band's best-selling albums. In October 2019, Abbey Road re-entered the UK charts, again hitting number 1. Abbey Road has remained in print since its first release in 1969. The original album was released on 26th of September in the UK and 1st of October in the US on Apple Records. It was reissued as a limited edition picture disc on vinyl in the US by Capitol on the 27th of December 1978, while a CD reissue of the album was released in 1987 with a remastered version appearing in 2009. The remaster included additional photographs with additional liner notes, and the first, limited edition, run also included a short documentary about the making of the album. In 2001, Abbey Road was certified 12 Fives Platinum by the Recording Industry Association of America, RIAA. The album continues to be reissued on vinyl. It was included as part of the Beatles Collector's Crate series in September 2009, and saw a remastered LP release on a 180-gram vinyl in 2012. A super deluxe version of the album, which featured new mixes by Giles Martin, was released in September 2019 to celebrate the original album's 50th anniversary. As of October 2019, Abbey Road has sold 204,608 pure sales in the United Kingdom, with all consumed sales standing at 227,230 units. Post-1994 sales stand at 827,029.